Hey folks, welcome to week 4 of GID216, Motion Graphics for Interactive Media. Alright, what are we doing this week? Let's go over to modules, we'll go down to week 4, and let's take a look. Okay, so this week we are back in After Effects working on motion graphics projects, and we are focusing this week on compositions and layers. Now, we did already introduce the basic idea of compositions, but today we're going to have a conversation about what a composition is within a project and specifically how to use layers. Now, there's a lot of functionality in layers in After Effects, so today we're going to go over sort of the basics of layers and how that's going to work, and we're going to compare it to the layers in Photoshop, which will give you a point of reference. So, of course, you're familiar with the layers in Photoshop. As I show you things in After Effects, you're going to say, oh, that looks awfully familiar, and that'll sort of help you understand this. Now, there's more functionality in the layers palette in After Effects, but you're going to learn more of that in a little bit when you get to your training videos down here, okay? So speaking of which, your consumables this week, after you watch this lecture with me and you go through the basics, you're going to go down here to your consumables and you have 3 videos to watch and practice with. And of course, the subjects of these tie right into our theme for the week. It's going to go over After Effects composition in more detail than we're going to cover in a second, pre-composing, and of course using the layers properties, okay? Make sure you stop the video at this point here because these are all one big giant video. So start at this point and then work your way through to here and then you'll be good for the week, okay? Now remember, your goal here is to set aside time this week to practice with these things in After Effects so that you feel confident doing these particular skills in After Effects. So watch this video with me, then go back and practice with these, and then you'll be pretty good at this. Now, as far as stuff that's due this week, the final for Project 1, which is your lower third that you were creating in After Effects, where you started by creating it in Adobe Illustrator, and then you were moving it over to Adobe After Effects to add some basic movement to it. So your lower third, the final version of it, is due at the end of this week, so don't miss that. Meanwhile, once that's done, you're going to start your new project, which is Project 2, which is to create a lyric video. So after we're done with the overview of compositions and layers, and you watch and practice with these videos, then at the end of this video, we're going to cover what exactly Project 2 is, and you'll see what that is. But I'm sure you know what a lyric video is. They're all over the place. Anyway, so let's hop over to Adobe After Effects. We'll do our overview, and then we'll take a look at what Project 2 is all about. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at After Effects, and specifically we're going to focus a little bit at the beginning on the difference between a project and a composition. And then we're going to take a look specifically at the layers palette. Now, I know we kind of went over the basics of it, but we're going to look at a little more complex layers palette with a bunch of stuff in it already from a test project that I put together that we can look at. And we're going to talk about how the layers works similarly and differently than the layers palette in Photoshop. Okay, so when you first open up Adobe After Effects, of course, it asks you, do you want to start a new project from the welcome screen? I've already gone past that screen here, but all it really does is opens up the workspace in Adobe After Effects. Now, you're familiar with the workspace, of course. You got your tools up top. You got your media holder over here. You've got your main view screen here, which we'll get back to in a second. You've got all of your palettes over here, or your panels, which give you a variety of options, including special effects and audio and typography and whatnot. And then down the bottom, you've got your layers palette, which lives over here on the left, and then immediately to the right of that is the associated timelines. Every layer gets its own timeline. We're going to talk about that in a second. But first, before we do that, let's look at the central work area here. Now, this is really the composition screen. Now, composition in the world of After Effects is just really another word for the video screen that your motion graphics project is going to live upon. So a composition is a video screen. Now, that video screen could be a television, it could be a computer monitor, it could be an iPad, it could be a movie screen in a theater. It doesn't really matter. But whatever the format is of your composition, the width and the height, as well as the resolution and the frame rate, those are the elements that make up your composition, and that composition is what would be projected onto some kind of screen, whether it be a movie screen or your television screen or your computer screen or your iPad or your phone or whatever. So composition equals screen. Easy. Now, when you come in here, you have two options, and we talked about this last time. You can make a new composition from footage, which allows you to drag in some video footage, either stock footage or something that you shot, and it will make a new composition for you. But I generally don't recommend that because I like to start out with a blank composition and then slowly start adding things to my media pile over here, which I can bring back over to my composition. There's a lot of dragging and dropping going on in After Effects. Now, of course, you can import files by going to File and Import, but which we did do in Project 1 for our Adobe Illustrator files, and we will be importing certain things for certain projects, but other times I kind of like to just pick stuff up from my file browser and just drop it off into the media section. And then from there, I can pick and choose what I want to drag into the composition. And then from there, those items show up in your layers palette. So let's see how that works. So first things first, composition. So we hit new composition. Now you've seen this before because we started this for Project 1. Now, there is a lot to learn about the details of what makes up a composition. That is not really what we're going to do here. We can certainly research that. We'll find out the information. It'll be part of our upcoming consumables. But for most of our earlier projects, our two more simple motion graphics projects, we're going to stick with the presets from right here. And just like in Photoshop or Illustrator, you can go to certain presets in the start window and just pick, an 8.5 by 11 letter size piece of paper. I don't have to punch in all the details because we all know what a letter size piece of paper is. If I was designing for a website that is 1080 by 760 or 720 or whatever it is, then I could just go pick that standard sized website. So you don't necessarily have to know all the details right off the bat. And in truth, most destinations, most places where your work is getting published, whether it be in Photoshop or Illustrator or here in After Effects, the presets will cover the majority of your bases. So we are going to work primarily in this class with HDTV 1080-25, which means high definition television. And that doesn't mean it can only show on a television. Obviously, it can be projected onto a screen. 1080 is high definition. The higher of the two, there's 720 and then there's 1080. There is higher resolution above that. If you go below here, you can see that there is both 4K and 8K options, which are newer, more high resolution options, but we're not going to play with those in this class, not because they're not relevant, but because the larger your resolution of your composition, the more file size you're going to have to deal with. And, if you're working on a laptop that's maybe not the newest thing in the world, it might slow down your software a little bit. So let's try to, keep things zipping along. So we're going to work with HDTV 1080, which is still pretty standard in a lot of areas. 4K and 8K are new and just sort of coming out. Now, this is not to say that you can't work in this, but for this class, we'll stick with this. And then 25 refers to the frame rate, the frames per second. So when you pick that preset, then you'll see that the screen is 1920 wide, 1920 pixels wide, and 1080 pixels height. That is your standard size for 1080 HD TV. We want to keep the aspect ratio locked, which is a 16 by 9 widescreen aspect ratio. So even if we were to change the size, it would make sure that the aspect ratio stayed the same. Square pixels, like I said, the frame rate is 25 frames per second. The lower the frame rate, the more choppy the video looks. The higher the frame rate, the more smooth it looks. Also, the higher the frame rate, the larger the file size is going to be, and vice versa. 25 is pretty standard. We'll stick with that. Full resolution, of course, is the display resolution, which is what you're going to see here. If you find that your computer is kind of chugging along and you want to speed things up a little bit, you could look at it in lower resolution. Just to make your computer run a little bit better. But for now, we'll leave it at full resolution and we'll keep it from there, okay? All right, background, I always generally keep it at black just because it's easier to work from there, but you could, of course, change that by clicking on the color picker. But black is a good way to go. All right, so we're going to hit OK, and then that makes our composition. Now, like I said in our earlier video when we first learned how to set up Project 1, turning on your composition activates your layers and timeline palette and also turns on the majority of your tools up here because now we have a workspace to work within. So we're ready to rock and roll. All right, so that's a composition. It is no different than your artboard in Adobe Illustrator or your workspace or your canvas over in Adobe Photoshop. So same idea, the place where your work is going to go. And of course, all your media goes here. Now remember, the composition itself is also in your media pile. So the composition itself lives over here too. Now, of course, you can right-click on the name of the composition. And like a lot of things in the Adobe products, they just start numbering things. So Comp 1, Comp 2, Comp 3. You can have multiple compositions running at the same time. Just like in Adobe Illustrator, you can have multiple artboards open at the same time. Same sort of idea. So if you wanted to use the same assets, the same photography, the same video clips, the same audio clips, blah, 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 in different compositions for different purposes, then you could have multiple compositions running within the same project with access to the same media. So to simplify, a project is basically like a folder. And then inside that folder, you can have your artboards or your pieces of canvas that you're going to be working on. Those are your compositions. And then also inside that folder, you could have your stock photography or your video clips or your audio clips. And those are the individual elements, the assets of your media that you will then drag onto one of your compositions. So project is a folder, composition is like an artboard, and then your media assets stay in there and you can add them to your composition. Okay, hopefully that analogy makes sense, but we'll be able to see it from there. Now, like I said, we can right-click on the name of it and rename it something. And so we can just call this test or whatever you would like, and then hit return on your keyboard. Okay, so now we're ready to go. Now, of course, some of the information about the composition is also up here. It tells you it's a composition. Yes, we know that. And it tells you the size and all that. So not a ton of information. Now, anything else that we bring over here can be added to our media pile. So now I have this test folder here, which has a bunch of stuff in it. I've got a video clip of a beach in an ocean here with somebody swimming. Notice there's no sound, right? Okay. And then I've got another video clip of the beach in the ocean. Again, no sound, but really pretty video clip. And then I've got another video clip of the ocean kind of crashing onto the beach. Okay. Now, I chose these from a stock photography website. I believe I got these from Pexels or Pixabay. And now, I don't know if these are shot at the same beach, but I made a point of picking out clips that look like they could be from the same beach. I paid attention to the watercolor, the sand color, and just wanted to sort of see that it could all sort of work together. Okay. So there's that. Then on top of that, I've got two audio clips. One is the sound of waves crashing on the beach. So we got this one. So there you go. And then this one here is a bit of music that I found. Okay, so you can see the pieces, parts, pieces of what we've got going on here. Then on top of that, I have a graphic of a squid. It's just a silhouette of a squid. It's an Adobe Illustrator file. So it's a vector. Now, of course, this is in white, so when I open it up here, you won't really be able to see it because it's white on white, but trust me, it's there. It's like a polar bear in a snowstorm, right? But it's there. And then on top of that, I have a silhouette of a graphic that we're going to use too, which you also can't see. It's white on white. So those are all my components. Now, if I start dragging them over here to my media pile, so I can grab a bunch of them, so I can command click or shift click and just start picking them and drag them all over here to the media. But I want to just drag over one at a time just so you can see how it works. So I'm going to drag one over here, and you'll see I get a little green plus symbol, drops it in. So there's my beach video. And then go back to my pile, and let's grab the other beach video and the other beach video. So there you go. Now, before I move over other stuff, let's talk about organizing your media pile. Now, this is not your layers palette, but it kind of functions like a layers palette. We're going to get to the layers palette in a second. So if you can rearrange these by simply picking them up and putting them in the order that you want and using the sort feature to sort them by name alphabetically or type, Now, I normally like to sort by type so that the composition stays up at the top. And then all of the file types, like these are all video files, they all stay together. So I sort by name, so they're alphabetical, and then sort by type. And you do it in that order, and then you get composition at the top, items at the bottom, just to stay nice and organized. So now I'm going to bring over my audio file, the first one, that's an MP3 audio file. This one's also an MP3. There you go, got that. And then I'm going to grab my Adobe Illustrator file, get that squid. Now, because I'm importing it, it's going to ask, what would you like to do? And we're going to import it as footage, not as a new composition. I already have my composition. I don't need a new one. And I am going to choose the layer. There's only one layer. I'm going to go with layer 1. I could merge the layers, but I want to keep the transparency intact. So we'll just do layer 1, and see, there's that squid I told you about, right? Creepy. So next, we'll grab the silhouette. We'll drag that over. Oh, actually, you know what? I don't need that. I'm sorry. I take that back. All right, so now I've got my items over here, and so I'm sorting them again by name, and then sort by type with the composition on top. Now, of course, the composition is still black. There's nothing going on here. But now I need to start dragging items over to the composition, and we'll see what happens and how it starts to build out the layers palette. So first, I'm going to drag over my first beach scene. Notice, by the way, before I drag it over, if you just click on one of them, you get a little preview up here. So if you're not sure which one is which, I can click through and see the previews up here. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's that one, that's that one. Now what I'm trying to do is tell a story here, right? I want to show them in order. So maybe I want to start with this one and then go to this one. Now, of course, I can rearrange that later in the timeline, but I kind of like to drag them over in the order that I want them in. I know it's sort of doing it twice, but that just sort of keeps my brain nice and straight on how I'm doing it. Also, just like we renamed the composition, remember, you can rename any of these files too. Now, I would like to say that you should probably name them what you want to name them over here in your file system first. That's probably better practice. But if you just have a name that you don't recognize, then you can name them over here. But either way. So pick up what you want. So I'm going to go with this beach footage first, pick it up. And just like we showed you last time, notice that you can see the edges of the shape of it. It conforms to the 16:9 ratio of my composition. And using like little magnetics, it will snap to the middle of the composition. And then I can drop it off and boom, there it is. Now, because it's a video clip, it does not have an infinite timeline. A still image, the timeline will eat up the entire horizontal path of the layer. Excuse me. But of course, a video clip is only as long as the video clip is, however long it is. So as we can see here, if we look up top here, it'll tell us, you know, the size of it and the frame rate and all that fun stuff, and tells you how long it is. It's 10.19 seconds. So we can see here that that matches up, right? Here's the 10-second mark on my timeline, and that's a little bit more than that. So this shows me how long it is, and then of course if I grab the playhead and scrub through, I can see the video moving. You notice that it goes automatically into low resolution mode as I'm scrubbing, just to make the scrubbing possible, and then boom, it disappears. So I'm going to want to sort of line things up as I go, right? And figure out how I want to put them in. So that's in, and then of course if I just hit the space bar on the keyboard, it will just play more naturally and play in full resolution. Okay, notice no sound. None of these have sound, which is why I got that nice MP3 file of waves crashing on a beach. And then I can drag in the next video clip, same thing. I'm just going to drag it right over the same composition. Now, you might think, oh, what happened? I just covered over the other one. I only covered it over because they're happening in the same time frame. I'll show you how we're going to mess with that in a minute. But this one runs. This one's a little bit longer. And so there you go. Now, down here, you'll notice that the layers palette is starting to populate. Now, I'm going to keep dragging these over here and organizing them and moving them around so I can have them show up on the timeline in different places by simply dragging their existence down the road a piece so that they appear and disappear at certain points. So we can start with that one, and then boom, it switches to that one, and we get the idea. Because remember, the composition works with the z-axis, right? So let's remember our axes, or axi, X is your horizontal axis, Y is your vertical axis, Z is your three-dimensional axis that comes towards you in space. So because I have this on top of the other one, this deals with the Z-axis. So if I were to back this up in time, right, and then I can move this one here, and you'll see that, you know, they exist in the same place in terms of the Z-axis. So they're on top of each other like I'm stacking cards. Meanwhile, down here in the timeline, it's a different story. The layers are starting to layer up my different items that I'm dragging onto the composition, but how they appear on the stage, that is linear, working horizontally through time. So it's a different unit of measure. It's a different way of laying things out. So remember, we're starting at 0 seconds and then working our way this way. So here we're stacking things on the Z-axis. Here they are appearing in the timeline based on a linear progression of time. So if you can keep that straight in your head, you're good to go. Okay? So again, stacking things up, things working their way through time. All right, now I'm going to start moving things down here from my media pile to my layers, and then I'm going to start adjusting where they appear on the timeline. And I'll do some other stuff to it, kind of just to sort of see how it goes. Okay? All right, so let's take a look at that. Hold on. Okay, so we are back here, and I took all of my layers and dragged them down here. Now you're probably wondering, why does my media pile look really empty? Well, that's because I went ahead and made a folder, which you can see down here at the bottom of your media pile. You can make a new folder, and so that allowed me to organize all my layers nice and neat here, so that I can have them sort of visually separate from my composition, which I renamed Beach Test, right? But all I did is I dragged down the layers over here, and I started laying them out in a way that makes sense. Now, I also went and added some typography and added a couple of effects to the typography, and you'll get to that stuff in your other tutorial videos. But here I just wanted to really stay focused on what happened to the layers palette, okay? Otherwise this would be a really long video lecture. And so I'd rather you look at those things in the other tutorial videos. But here let's just stay focused on the layers. So let's look at the layers now. So like Photoshop, of course, they're all neatly organized, and notice that the icon of each one sort of tells you what it is. So all of these are typography layers. You can see by the giant letter T, tells you that it's typography. So you'll see in a minute that I have some typography going on here. And then we have that Illustrator layer, which is the squid silhouette. And then we have the two media files, actually the 3 media files, which are video, right? So we've got, and I just renamed them 1, 2, and 3. Those are the beach videos. And then I've got my 2 audio files, the waves and the bit of music. So that's all nice and organized. Also notice that they are color-coded. Typography layers get red, the vector layer got purple, and then both the video and the audio gets kind of this bluish green color. So that's also another way to keep them track in your head, right? You have some areas over here that you can lock. If I want to lock a layer, I can just simply check off the lock box here, and that will keep it from moving or being messed with in any way. I can't make any changes to it if I lock it. That's similar to Photoshop. And of course you have the eyeball, which is also similar to Photoshop, so I can shut things off and on like this just by turning the eyeball off. Again, that doesn't delete them, it just sort of shuts them off temporarily. And then notice that the 2 audio layers, they don't get eyeballs because they're not visual. They instead get little speaker symbols, which makes me mute it or unmute it by simply clicking that. So same sort of idea. That should all be pretty self-explanatory. Now, what you're going to learn in the other tutorial videos is that each layer has a set of adjustments built into it. If I fold down a layer, so I'm going to fold down my top layer, which is type, you'll see here that you have different adjustments you can make under transform. There are text adjustments, because it's a text layer, and there are transform options. Every layer gets the same transform options: anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. You'll learn about these in the other tutorial videos, but I just wanted to show you that they're all the same. And then if we go over here to the timeline, of course, you can see that each layer has been dragged out to a different place in the timeline so that it appears at a certain point in the timeline and then disappears at a certain point in the timeline. Some of them are naturally, they have a natural length to them, like the video clips, right? They're only stuck around for so long. And then other things like the type, I had to decide on how long they stayed on the screen by shortening the length of their existence on the timeline, like we did in the first project. And then you put it all together, and this is what your layers looks like. So just by looking at the layers and looking at the timeline that's associated with the layers, without me even playing the video, you can kind of almost guess what's going to happen, right? So the ocean sound, the waves sound, runs for how long on the timeline? The entire timeline, which means you're going to hear the sound of the ocean the entire time that the video is playing. Next, we have that bit of music that I got. Does that run the entire timeline? No, it starts about 2 seconds into the video. There's the 2 seconds. That's where it starts. So you can predict that the music won't be playing at the very beginning, but it's going to turn on pretty soon, and then it'll continue through the whole video. Next, we've got the 3 ocean videos, right? We've got this one here, then we've got the next one that comes up, and then the next one. So how do those work? Well, if I look at the first one, you can see that it starts at the very beginning of the video, and I can see it up here in the composition screen. But then right about 12 seconds or 11 and a half seconds, it stops. But then immediately, the next ocean video starts. So it just goes from one to the next one, and that runs till about 22 seconds in the time frame. Then the third video of the ocean runs from about the 22-second point all the way to almost the end. It leaves a couple of seconds at the end where it disappears. Now, there's no other visuals, right? So what the heck happens to that, right? If we go across here and move down a little bit in the timeline, you can see that since there's no other video or photography, it'll just be black, right? Because the background we chose for our composition is black. Now, my little squid graphic is going to pop up down here somewhere, as long as another piece of typography. And of course, notice that the timeline bars are colored the same highlight color as their layers. So type 1s are red. The squid, which is a vector graphic, is purple. So they're easier to find on the timeline, right? Now, these little bits of typography, I got this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Well, you can read what it says over here, right? And you can see when they appear in the timeline. So the first bit of type happens 2 seconds in, and it leaves 4 seconds in, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of imagine what's going to happen without me even playing it. But I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to play it. So let's play it and we'll take a look. Okay, now there's things we can talk about here in terms of composition and typography and use of sound, but that's not what we're here for today. And we'll come back and we'll look at this test project again when we're discussing some other things in After Effects. But again, the main thing I want you to look at here is how are the layers organized? How is everything color-coded? How are they named? How do the layers function? You should recognize some of this functionality from Photoshop. And then how do the associated timelines with each layer present themselves? And if I now go through and scrub through using the playhead really slowly, it becomes pretty evident how things appear and disappear on the stage. Okay? All right, so there you go. That is going to get us through the layers in Adobe After Effects. And from here, we can move this time. Last time we made a lower third. This time we're going to make a lyric video. So you know what lyric videos are, right? You've seen them. If you have a favorite song, chances are someone has done a lyric video for it. Sometimes the artist themselves makes the lyric videos, and sometimes fans make them, or people associated with the artist or whatnot. It's basically cool and creative typography moving to the words and the beats of the song. Music publishers like these videos because they are quick to make and normally don't cost a whole lot of money to make. It's much different than filming a whole video involving the artist and whatnot. Music videos, of course, have been an integral part of the music industry since television became a household item in the 1950s. Since the birth of MTV in the 1980s, music videos became cinematic, about grandeur and symbolic storytelling. Some people believe that the 1987 video for Prince's song Sign of the Times, which is a really good song, was really the first lyric-style video in the mainstream world. In the 2010s, of course, this style of music video became a huge trend with the rise of video sharing sites like YouTube. Lyric videos have come a long way since then. Just take a look at Weird Al Yankovic's lyric video mocking the song Blurred Lines. If you haven't seen it, I put a link to it here, which will take you out. We're not going to play the whole thing here, but if you haven't checked out this video, it is a pretty brilliant YouTube video, or rather lyric video on YouTube from one of his songs. All right, let's play through this here. Always an ad. All right, so anyway, you get the idea. So anyway, it's a lot of fun. Certainly check it out. It is definitely a great lyric video. But anyway, back to the assignment. So if you've never seen a lyric video, which I sort of imagine you have, it's exactly what it sounds like. For the duration of the song, the lyrics appear on the screen over some evocative and appropriate imagery, photography and or video, sometimes animation, sometimes illustration, whatever. Lyric videos are commonly created using Adobe After Effects, which is what we're learning here. If you'd like to learn more about lyric videos in general, this is a great tutorial on how to create a lyric video in After Effects, or you can just follow along with the directions here, but this will get a little deeper into it, so certainly check it out. Now, the first thing, of course, we have to do is choose a song that you like. Now, of course, to add music to After Effects, you have to have the actual digital file on your computer. After Effects does not link to Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that. It does not allow for that. So you have to have a MP3 or some other type of music file on your computer, just like we were looking at when we went over layers, right? I had those music clips that I had physical files on my computer. So there's a few ways around this. So if you can figure that out, you're welcome to use any song from your personal collection if you would like, but that's not what I'm doing here. Instead, we are going to choose a song from one of the following royalty-free collections. Now, of course, here for school projects, we do have to deal with royalty-free items because you can't be stealing music from other people. But these links here will take you to collections of songs from a variety of different people, and they have put their songs out into the world for free. They're royalty-free, and most importantly, for our use in Adobe After Effects, they're downloadable. So you can download the actual music file to your computer and then use that in Adobe After Effects. So check all these out. Take a little bit of time. It might take a little while to go through these and see which ones you like and which one you want to use. Remember, this doesn't have to be your favorite song in the world. It just has to be a song that you're going to use for this assignment. So go ahead. Take a look. I'll wait. Okay, so I'm assuming you're done with that by now. Set up your After Effects project, which is what you're going to do next. So now you can open up Adobe After Effects. Now you'll notice in Project 1 we started in Adobe Illustrator to make our lower third graphics. Here we're diving right into Adobe After Effects. We're not going from Illustrator to After Effects. We're working here directly. So start a new project from the welcome screen. Choose a new composition. We're going to go with the standard preset of HD TV 1080-25 that we've been using. Make sure you name your project appropriately, your last name _ project 2, so that I know which one it is. And then the song that you chose from one of these collections that you've downloaded on your computer, you're going to drag it into the media window, into that media collection in After Effects. And then once it's set, you can drag the song onto the composition, and now the song will play through the entirety of the composition for however long your timeline ends up being, depending on how long the song is, naturally. So there you go. Make sure you save your work. So that's sort of getting you rolling. You've picked out a song, you've set up your After Effects project in your composition, and then you drag the song over this. Now you've got everything but the typography and the imagery. Oh, that's the whole thing, isn't it? All right, so there's your composition settings. We already talked about that. All right, so now the next step of this is brainstorming and imagery. So now that you have your song in place and your project is saved, now you've got to start thinking about, well, what do you want this to look like, right? You're not just putting lyrics up with no thought. You guys are creative. So you've got to hunt for some engaging imagery, still photography or video, whichever you would like. Be sure to listen to your song multiple times so you can understand what the song is all about. What kind of mood is the song about? What are the lyrics talking about? What story is it telling? Become familiar with it. Start brainstorming ideas for the visuals for your video. What do you imagine? What does it remind you of? What type of imagery feels appropriate to you? Maybe take down some notes. This is where your creativity comes in. Everybody's going to be different. Even if I gave you all the same exact song, you would all still come up with different ideas for the visuals. So you're going to do that on your own and come up with some really good ideas. Feel free to work with your classmates and do some brainstorming together if you would like. Now, once you've got some ideas and maybe jotted down some notes, then you're going to hop on over to Unsplash or Pexels or Pixabay, and you can hunt for free-to-use photography, which you can get from all of them, or free-to-use video clips, which you can get from Pixabay. And, by the way, Pexels just started offering video clips too. It's a recent thing, so I haven't updated the assignment yet. So anyway, you can get photography and video clips from Pexels and Pixabay, and you can get photography from all three of them. Download way more stuff than you think you're going to need. Even though your song might be 2 or 3 minutes long, get a whole bunch of photography and video clips. If you don't use some of it, that's okay. It's better off having more than less. Put them into a folder, get them organized, rename them if you have to so you know what the heck you're talking about, and then sort of start to think about how you're going to lay them out. How do you want them to appear on the screen? In what order? How are you going to use the timeline? Now, when you're picking out photos and video clips, like I showed you in the test project a few minutes ago with the beach scene, try to pick out photos and video clips that look like they kind of work together in terms of visual style, okay? They may not be photographed by the same photographer or videographer, but you want them to feel like they belong together. So try to work for some visual themes that make sense for what you're trying to accomplish from your brainstorming. Okay, the next thing you're going to do, of course, is start designing it in After Effects. So now that you've got everything set up and you've got all your photos and videos, you can start dragging those photos and videos from your nice, neat file section into the media window in After Effects for easy access. You can always delete the ones that you don't use. So drag them all into After Effects, and then you can play around with them. Remember, if you don't drag them from the media section over to the composition, they won't be in the composition, and then you can always delete them later. It's no big deal. Focus on the timeline layers in After Effects, and using the skills that you've gained so far, both from practicing, following the videos, going along with my videos, you are going to design your lyric video by dragging in your imagery and adding the typography. This will require a lot of patience, but the goal is to have the lines of type, or the words, appear at the right time during the song. You want them to pop up when that lyric is being sung. This takes patience. So take your time, try to get them to line up and appear the way you want them to, right? That's how you want to do this. So start with the typography, get that lined up nice and neat, then you can start putting in your images and your video clips and just kind of play around with it. At this point, you're kind of playing jazz, right? Okay, now, be sure to credit the musician of your song at the end. Put in a little bit of typography at the end that just tells you who the artist is, song by so-and-so. That would be nice. And if you would like some extra credit, if you do a really good job putting this together and you've got a little bit of free time between now and the time that it's due, and you want to add some of the preset animations to the typography using the effects and presets or layer transformations, go do that. But if not, that's okay too. We're still learning at this point. But that's extra credit. You can gain 10 extra points if you would like that. Now, deliverables. You are going to have a draft of this due coming up in a week. So you have 1 week to make a draft. And then you'll get some feedback from myself and your classmates on your draft. And then you'll have another week to go make some changes to it. And then you'll turn in your final. So in both cases, you're turning in your After Effects file. And of course, remember, at the very end of the semester, we are going to publish these to YouTube, but we'll deal with that later. Don't stress out about that now. All right, so hopefully you're clear on this. Go get to work on Project 2. It's going to be a lot of fun. All right, I will see you guys soon.